Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. Robert along with Sports Radio 610 Shaun Bijani. And if you're new to the show, welcome aboard. 45 years in journalism between the two of us, over 35 covering sports in the Houston area. And Shaun, even though there's been a ton of criticism about the Rockets brass, you got to give them credit for interviewing some really strong coaching candidates so far. Are you ready for me to go through who they've interviewed and who's scheduled?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hear them.
All right, let's talk about the biggies right off the top. Frank Vogel just won a championship with the Lakers 3 years ago, took the Pacers to 2 Eastern Conference finals, knocked out by the LeBron-led Heat teams. Love that candidate. Ime Udoka, I know I'd screw that name up, took the Celtics to the NBA finals last year in his first and only NBA head coaching season. If it wasn't for a banged-up Jason Tatum, maybe they win the title. Kenny Atkinson did a fantastic job with the pre-Kevin Durant overachieving Brooklyn teams a few years ago, worked as an assistant under two of the best coaches in the league since then, and Ty Lue and Steve Kerr. And Shaun, when Sam Cassell is maybe fourth on the list of guys I'm excited about and what Rockets fans get excited about with Sam Cassell's leadership, and, we know what he's done, then, I think the Rockets have done a pretty good job with the guys that they brought in.
Yeah. During this whole, experience during this season, really, and ever since the season had ended, we've constantly been making all sorts of comparisons or finding similarities between what the Rockets have done, what we've gone through as fans and media, having watched and endured this team for the last couple of 3 years, really. If you're going to make another, sort of comparison to the Texans in terms of what the Rockets have done, yeah, give them a round of applause, really, because people in the know talk, people in the know a little bit more about what's happening inside the organization, and, quite honestly, just have a better handle, a better grip on things that they've witnessed, that they've watched. We could all watch the same game. We could all watch the same soap opera play out in front of us. But, basketball people are just going to have a little bit different take on the situation. And that's just a long way of saying that, hey, the Rockets, as bad as they've been organizationally, as bad as they've been on the court, the fact that they've got the top coaching candidates in-house to interview, I think, yes, it's a great sign. Now, having said that, it still comes down to making the right decision. And I had a question for you because, while I've done a pretty good dive on a lot of these coaching candidates, you mentioned a guy like Frank Vogel. He and I think Ime Udoka are two that come to mind that have actually been through rebuilds. Now, I don't think Frank Vogel was there in Orlando for the teardown, but he was there as they were sort of recalibrating. For you, does that make a big difference in terms of the experience that he had in Orlando versus what he would potentially be stepping into, him or Ime? And I'm not even sure the whole process that Ime went through. I think that was a fairly quick teardown and rebuild that he experienced in Toronto as an assistant, I believe. I can't remember. But do you see the comparisons, and is that a big factor for you at all?
Not really. I just look at what they've been able to do with what they've had. I appreciate the fact, though, that Frank Vogel has had a bunch of different situations that he's been in. He's had veterans with the LeBron James and Anthony Davis Lakers. He had a system in Indiana that was basically dependent on Paul George and a young team in Indiana. Well, there were some veterans, but he had his best player, which was Paul George, as a young player that was leading them to the Eastern Conference Finals. And, that Orlando thing, it wasn't enough really for me to gauge how he did while he was there. But, to me, I'm just looking at my respect for each of these guys. And we're talking about two guys that, between Udoka and Vogel, that have been to NBA finals. We're talking Kenny Atkinson that, hadn't been there as a head coach, but I mean, he's been with the Warriors with their finals last year and championship. So, these guys have been in big stages. They've been around it. They know it. They've been in various situations too. I think that's a big factor. Udoka's trained under Pop. Kenny Atkinson's, got Ty Lue and Steve Kerr. I mean, these are really guys that have been trusted with some big time coaches, and been around those guys.
As I'm listening to you kind of break this down a little bit, I'm trying to piece together in my mind the most important qualities, accomplishments, processes that you would want if you're Tillman Fertitta and Rafael Stone in your new coach. Given this situation with so much young talent on this roster right now, I'm looking at a coach that can offer me, maybe not necessarily, Robert, the best total package, but who's got the most experience with a couple of these things. One, accumulating good veteran talent around a young roster, bringing in good quality guys. Where has it worked the best? Who's done the best job of getting that talent and infusing them into their game plan? And then two, aside from looking at a guy who, like Frank Vogel, take for instance, who's more of a defensive minded head coach, he's never really boasted like great offenses. You can weigh those things, but everybody knows that. Going deeper is who, as a coach, whether it be maybe an assistant, like top assistants like Sam Cassell or Adrian Griffin or whoever it is, who's done the best job of getting those guys to work together. Because ultimately, one of our biggest concerns talking about this roster is just that. Like, yeah, we all know that these guys are super talented, but there's a multitude of personalities, and they're coming out of a culture and into a totally different one with whoever this coach is. Who's going to do the best job? Who's best suited to figure out who's going to work, who's not going to work, and meshing all of those different kinds of personalities?
Sure. And I got to talk about my top three guys. I'm going to put them in order in just a second, but just want to remind everybody to subscribe and comment on YouTube if you're watching, but want to hear us while you're driving, shopping, or working out, whatever you're doing. Listen on the run by subscribing on your favorite podcast app. Shaun, if Udoka doesn't have more skeletons in the closet, then he's my number one choice. It's an easy number one choice for me, but the skeletons
does.
always
I think we would have found out about him already.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I would put Atkinson slightly ahead of Vogel just because I trust his offensive abilities more than Vogel. I think both of those guys would be pretty good defensively. Like I said, we got to talk defense though, because that wins championships. And that's why I just keep coming back to Vogel. And Vogel seems they always finish top 10 in the league in defense.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. And if he has a really great offensive, assistant coach that could handle that aspect, but doesn't it really kind of come down to, look, here's a defensive mentality. These guys are young, they're athletic, they're fast, they can be physical. These are just young ballers, right? A lot of this defensive mentality, I mean, I'll die on this hill all day, every day, can be learned, can be taught. And it's just a lot about the will. But if you got a really great offensive guy on staff that can, get the most out of the talent that the Rockets do have and the talent that they're going to accumulate, because they're going to need some good, solid veterans infused with this young roster. And not everybody you see on this roster is going to be here, 5-6 months from now. I guarantee you that. That's to me the most important thing. But yes, a guy like Vogel, who does have championship pedigree, who has done a great job working with a multitude of tough personalities from a veteran standpoint, can he mesh those guys, good veteran, quality veterans, XYZers, with the guys on this roster right now? The guys that are going to be, that need to be, that are the future of this organization: Jabari Smith, Jalen Green, if it's a KPJ, whoever it is, Jashawn Tate, you name it. Whoever he decides is the best fit, then I'm all for it. I'm absolutely all for it. It doesn't just come down to, that's what I was telling you. I don't care really about like the defensive stats, the offensive stats, but maybe like who's got the best package, the best mix, but most importantly, who's had the biggest success rate in terms of actual coaching, the stuff that doesn't show up in the box score, the win-loss column, but assimilating personalities and creating a team atmosphere.
Yeah, the top four all come with great leadership. We know that they're proven. Sam Cassell, you can put him in the top four if you want, because we know his leadership
because of his experiences.
Yeah, his leadership for sure. A little worried about Sam Cassell though. We could talk about him in a second, but just a little bit worried about the fact that he's been a lot under Doc Rivers in the last few years, and Doc Rivers not necessarily known as a fantastic coach by a lot of people out there, even though he won the championship back about 15 years ago. But James Borrego was another interview, Sean, I want to talk about, because he might not get anybody in Houston excited, but he did a good job with below average Hornet teams. And if they hire Udoka, the fact that they interviewed him, remember we talked about this with the Texans, maybe they're interviewing guys just to put them on the staff. Borrego may come in as an assistant because Udoka and him have worked together under Popovich. So they have a good relationship. And that's one of the things you're watching what the Rockets are doing. I think there's some real, key things, like who are they, like Sam Cassell, for example, are they interviewing him because maybe they can lure him over as an assistant if something happens to Doc Rivers? And he's got a relationship right now with James Harden in Philadelphia. You got to look at that too.
Yeah, in regards to Borrego, it's coming from Popovich. You got that sort of tutelage, that sort of mentorship, just that experience under one of the greatest coaches of all time. You might think, you know what, it's my time. I'm not here for an assistant coaching job. I'm here because
Borrego was in with the Hornets, and I don't know which job he's going to get out there that's available. I don't know if he's going to get a job and being with the Hornets, I don't know if it's going to be a sexy hire for another team. So maybe he, works under the Rockets until maybe he can make that. A lot of times we see this. A guy is a head coach. He comes back as an assistant. He sort of works on bringing up his value again. And people go, well, man, he's worked with say they bring in Udoka. It's like, well, he worked with Udoka, and look what the Rockets did. And look at they went from 0 to 100 under Udoka. And, you have to look at it from his perspective. And that's why I say, hey, Borrego coming in because what they get with this staff as far as assistant goes is huge. We talked about it with the Texans just a few months ago.
No, you're absolutely 100% right. I mean, you want to compile the best possible staff that you can. And the more experienced guys with previous head coaching experience, guys that have worked with these tough personalities, 100%, guys that have been considered. Borrego's been a guy who was considered to be a top assistant here before when Mike D'Antoni was the head coach. And so maybe he's got a little bit of more familiarity. I mean, it's a different regime, but, certainly of the inner workings, at least what it used to be like versus maybe what it is now. He too is one of those others like a Cassell, like a Brooks, that can weigh their experiences from what it used to be to what it is now, what they're hearing, what they have a feel of. But I agree with you. You want to put together the best possible staff. And the Rockets are trending in a really good direction because, as I said, and you've talked about extensively, they've interviewed the top candidates. I mean, there's nobody that it's like, hey, well, why didn't they talk to this guy? And there's been no kind of negligent process this offseason where they've just neglected somebody or somebody's just not wanted to touch them with a 10-foot pole to raise questions. The Rockets have seemingly are in the process of putting a lot of this drama behind them. And where it could get stirred up even more, though, is, and I'm sure we'll get to this.
Let's get to it. James Harden.
Seriously consider bringing James Harden back, right?
Yeah. The whispers, Woj, fan the flames again. Rockets, maybe getting James Harden. We've both been pretty clear we're not enthused by a Harden reunion. Right. But Sean, two factors affect this. Number one, if the Rockets land the second pick in the lottery, they're drafting Scoot, meaning I doubt Harden fits in with Scoot and Jalen unless it's a short-term contract. Number two, and this goes back to the coaching, does whoever they hire as coach want Harden? I mean, I don't think anybody's factored that in yet, but do they feel like Harden, Jalen, and their backcourt makes sense? Do these defensive-minded coaches, like, for example, Vogel and Udoka, think that works? And Sean, you wonder if his name is getting mentioned in these interviews, and
it has to. Again, I go back to my first point that I'd made. When you're talking to these coaches, why we were giving the Rockets kudos for just getting the best guys, the top guys in-house to sit down for an interview. That's great. Well, they're doing it for a multitude of reasons. It's a fact-finding mission. And then two, they're obviously somewhat interested in the opportunity to be a head coach here, but they come with their own questions as well. Hey, Tillman, hey, Rafael, how serious are you and is James about wanting to come back here? What do you think about this? Why would he want this? Why, what happened in his exodus, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever it's been now. I'd want to know everything I possibly can to make the best decision about even continuing the conversation about why you think I'm the best guy and why I feel like I'm the best guy to run this team. I feel like I'm the best guy with this group and some veterans that I have in mind, but in no equation does James Harden fit. That's a thing. Or you know what? Maybe you do have a guy that could say, you know what, like, hey, how serious are you guys about bringing Harden back? Because I could see some beautiful things here. Man, I don't know if a guy like Scott Brooks, would jive with that, or Sam Cassell would jive with that, or Frank Vogel, defensive-minded head coach, would jive with that, bringing a guy like Harden in and having to worry about sharing the ball in all of these different capacities. I don't know, but it's absolutely got to be a conversation.
Harden sharing the ball, I don't think that's a big deal anymore because he, with the Embiid, he's just become Mr. Assist guy. He's, near the top of the league. If not, he might have been the top of the league this year.
And he was really good here. He was really good here, and he was the guy here too. So I mean that's a good point. But what I mean by sharing the ball is it's ultimately about taking the next step in developing the talent that you have right now with a Jabari Smith and a Jalen Green.
I'm not worried about him on the offensive end. I'm just worried about him on the defense. That's it for me. The defense, and in the playoffs as well. Like playoff Harden, obviously that's always a concern with me. I want to leave the NBA for a few minutes to talk Astros. Yeah. We're going to hear from an H-Town basketball legend with Longhorn and LeBron James ties before the show is over. So I'm going to go back to the NBA for the end, but stay tuned. And Shaun, let's move to the defending champions, man. As excited as I am about Corey Julks, I've noticed he has 48 plate appearances and 0 walks. And somehow his on-base percentage is lower than his batting average. In his last 2 minor league seasons, his on-base was near 350. So there's hope he improves. But if Brantley comes back in a week or two, he better get ready to platoon with Uncle Mike. Just a little observation anyway.
No, I think it's a good observation. We talked about the approach that he took at the plate, within the first week and a half, 2 weeks of the season. The thing that I like most about him at the plate is that he's aggressive. He's not a guy that, is going to work a lot of counts. I mean,
he's aggressive. All right. He's aggressive. All right.
He's up there to swing the bat. And, look, you've seen he's hit safely in most of his games. And I think that's kind of, to the eye, that's what you're seeing. If you're just kind of looking at the box score, some statistics, and you're like, okay, cool. Hey, this guy's hit safely in 12 of the 17, 18 games or whatever that they've played. That's pretty darn good, right? Yeah, it's okay. There's a lot of 1-for-4, performances sprinkled in there. And then, how important are those hits? Some of them have been pretty important. A lot of them, no, not so much. Stat fillers, but whatever. I like the fact that, he's been getting the opportunities, like Mauricio Dubon has gotten the opportunity and ran with it to play every day. Julks has gotten his fair share and a really good shot to start his major league career. I like what he's done so far. Again, it's so early. It's about the process. And right now, these young players, some of them, their heads are spinning. And they're in the film room and they don't know what they're looking at. They don't know how to take what they're seeing from themselves and apply it to the game. And that's where veterans, like Alex Bregman, Jose Altuve, even Yordan Alvarez, who's done such a great job with Mauricio Dubon and mentorship of him this offseason and this season already, kind of come in handy. So, wait and see. And you're right. Look, Brantley coming back maybe sooner than not originally expected, but expected at least of like the update that we got a week and a half ago where it was early May. Sounds like he's going to be back a little sooner. Cool. But he's going to have to adjust to another sort of role on the team. And hey, when you're a rookie, you have to do those things. But Michael Brantley getting back and being around the team every single day, you could have a worse guy in the clubhouse and in the dugout with you.
Oh, yeah. And again, with Brantley, it's like, hey, I'll believe it when I see it if you're going to be here and playing for a while because, the injuries and stuff like that. I want to get to another sort of underrated storyline that I've noticed early in the season, and many Astros fans might be peeking at those Forrest Whitley minor league numbers, Shaun. But Seth Martinez, he's probably peaking a little bit more at the Forrest Whitley numbers because he's been pretty pedestrian so far. League is hitting over 350 against him. Yeah, he's low man on the reliever totem pole. But I'm going to give you this, Shaun. this is a little secret thing here. Dusty loves his lefties in the bullpen. We know he's always whining about those lefties. Blake Taylor, early on with the Sugarland Space Cowboys, has a 0 ERA in 6 games. He was with the big league club a couple of years ago. He's only given up 2 hits in 6 games. Keep your eye on Taylor's return if the trend continues. Just saying.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's about making the adjustments, being healthy, seizing the opportunity. The numbers are good. Come on, bring them up. I've said this time and time again, and I get resistance on it, but I don't care at this point. Like, you're not 10 games out of first place or anything. You're just off of a World Series. You do have a lot of young talent that you're having to rely upon, with the bats off the bench. And you do have a few question marks in the bullpen that you need to address, and never mind what you're going to have to do with the starting rotation. There's questions abound with this ball club. There always are questions abound, whether you won the World Series or not. If a guy's performing and they absolutely deserve a shot to show what they can do at the next level, bring him up. I'm all for Blake Taylor coming back and seeing what he could do and create a little competition in season, see whose job he can take and keep. So yeah, bring it on. A guy that I was going to throw out that's maybe flying underneath the radar. I ain't heard one person mention his name. I haven't heard his name mentioned once. Phil Maton. He ain't a lefty or anything else. He's just a nut job that, punched something and broke his hand last postseason or last regular season because he got pulled, and pouted after that. But this guy's come out of the pen this year and in opportunities has pitched really well for the Astros. So if nobody else is going to do it, I'm going to do it. Hey, good job, Phil Maton. Maybe he screwed his head on straight and, gotten his mind where it needs to be. He certainly got his game where it needs to be so far.
Yeah, he's been good with the Astros the last couple of years. We forget about him because, he's not the sexy guy in the bullpen, but he's got a .36 whip after 7 games so far, 8 innings pitched,
Yeah.
.075 batting average against. You got to give him some props. I mean, Brian Abreu, enough said. The guy is about to get a statue in front of Minute Maid Park. Is it too early for that, Sean? Is it too early? Too soon?
It's too early. I just told you that I think he's going to be just fine, that he wasn't a flash in the pan this past postseason. I think he's absolutely an ascending player. And, one of the most valuable bullpen arms. Can't speak for the National League. Don't watch him too much anymore, but certainly in the American League, I think he's one of the most valuable arms out of the bullpen in the entire American League. And I'm glad the Astros have him. I'm glad the Astros, took another chance on him, bringing him back up, letting him, prove himself last year. And he came through in some ginormous moments, and he's continuing to ascend this season. So, yeah, big props to Abreu, big props to Maton. Again, we had the same – we haven't got there yet, but we've had these conversations in years past where, you get to about Memorial Day or whatever, Robert, and, we start talking about like the bullpen and who's going to be a factor, what decisions they need to make. There's always a guy or guys we're not talking about, we don't give any love to, we don't give any respect to, or we talk trash about them during the regular season, albeit early sometimes, that come up big when it matters most. And so keep an eye on guys like Phil Maton, keep an eye on guys like Blake Taylor, because sometimes when you get that second chance to prove yourself, ballers, they seize the day. And I think he could be a baller.
Yeah, when I looked at Seth Martinez, and it's not picking on Seth Martinez.
I like him too, man. I hate the start for him. I like Seth. I thought he
was
got a
great.
raw deal last year.
Well, he was great last year. It wasn't a raw deal. It was just like, it's just bad luck because bad luck that he won a championship. Yeah, that too. I don't know.
No, but he didn't get a chance to continue to contribute in the postseason. He got left off the roster.
I think he made one of the rosters though, right? At least one of them.
He might have.
I
don't think we saw him. Once Dusty figured out, like, hey, I got Montero, I got Neros, I got Stanek, and I got Presley. You didn't need anybody else. You didn't see anybody else, and the starters were going 7 innings every night.
But for a kid, it's winning a championship like your first year out of the box with the Astros is pretty nice. That's.
Oh yeah. He pitched so good, in my opinion, during the regular season. If he needed to make a spot start, if he was long relief out of the pen, I thought he did a really good job with what the Astros asked him to do in various roles. And I just thought he had the stuff. He didn't have lights out stuff, but I thought he had good stuff to keep hitters off balance and at least give them something else to prepare for, give hitters something else to think about. And hey, look, maybe this is the year for Seth. Maybe he's one of those guys that, hey, maybe he's sent down, figure some stuff out, and he's brought back up. And maybe he's one of those guys that I'm talking about, like, keep an eye on because he might come up big when you absolutely need him most.
Yeah, the reason I brought him up was because, I mean, if you look at this bullpen there, it's all veterans. I mean, Maton is a veteran even. So if you're going to get rid of a guy, you might just be getting rid of him for good. Whereas Seth Martinez, I think there's some options left. And I know you like his stuff, but in this bullpen, it's not the best stuff in this bullpen anywhere close to the best stuff in this bullpen. And, Blake Taylor, he throws some nasty, he's got some nasty stuff in his repertoire, and he's a lefty. And that's why I just feel like, there's a possibility. And of course, Forrest Whitley is in waiting out. The thing with Forrest Whitley, my feeling is you're not bringing him up till June unless it's an emergency, because it's the old clock ticking. It's the old baseball clock ticking. And we never started the clock on Forrest Whitley. So you might as well, wait, if he is going to make it to the Astros, you might as well wait to start that clock.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there was a part of me, I think we had this conversation a few weeks ago where it was like, I was like, hey, bring him up already. Let's get this 6-man rotation going because he's pitching really well. And I think it was you and Steven, kind of talked me into, hey, man, just be patient, and I'm fine with that because, here's a guy like, again, we'd said, all right, if it wasn't being popped for steroids, it was an injury issue or he just wasn't pitching well. Okay. And now, knock on wood, seemingly he's got his baseball life and hopefully his personal life, kind of put together, and he's in a good place. The numbers are certainly lending it to all of those things to be true. Let's let him get established as just a professional ball player in a routine for the first time in years for a guy like Forrest Whitley. And then, hey, look, if it's meant to be, it certainly, unfortunately, looks like it could be for the Astros as they're dealing with, feels like they've already dealt with more injuries through the first 20 ball games of this season than they did all of last year. And they're going to need him at some point and continue to let him get assimilated to professional baseball lifestyle where he's pitching every few days and he could help this ball club.
I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I said, the Astros might be rushing some guys through the organization, according to Dana Brown, or at least challenging them, as Dana likes to say. Drew Gilbert early on in Asheville. I'm going to mention that because it's high A, and Drew Gilbert was the first round pick last year. And center field is not a solid position with the Astros, even though, give my guy Chaz some respect. Hopefully he gets back soon. But Drew Gilbert hitting .353 in his first 38 plate appearances in Asheville this year with a .921 OPS. Just something that I picked up on to notice a little bit. Anything on your mind with the Astros? Garcia, I know you're excited about his first start that he's looked good in anyway.
Yeah. His latest start, I mean, what'd he go? 7 innings, 2 hit ball, 9 Ks, something like that. I think he struck out like the first 6 outs that he recorded were all strikeouts, and he was getting them in a multitude of ways. And that start, last night, what is today? Thursday. So it was Wednesday, right? That start Wednesday was really important for him because out of the gate, struggling in his first 3 starts, we start talking, fans start talking, people start wondering like, hey, is this a mental thing with him that he's had to change, his setup? There's no more cha-cha, the whole thing. That's a mechanism. Every player has one to some degree to get going. And was he just kind of robbed of his? Is he going to have to figure something else out? I thought it was maybe a little bit of that, but I thought really ultimately, we talk about this all the time with the hitters. Batting stance and where their hands are and what their feet are doing. Hey, man, at some point, are you at the same spot as any other player at the point of contact? That's what it all comes down to. Are you balanced? Are you staying centered? Are you trying to drive the baseball? As a pitcher, at some point, where are you at in the release that you've had before where you've been most effective. That's all it kind of came down to for Luis Garcia. And through 3 starts, that's enough time to where you can pick up on a tendency or identify something that, you know what, here's this arm slot, or here's, where I'm not getting enough drive off of my back leg, whatever it is. You can identify that and figure it out and put it together. And he did it against a really freaking good ball club, Robert. And I'm telling you, this stretch of 3-4 series that the Astros are on right now, where they're going to see, some playoff teams, this is when they tend to play their best ball. But it's also that turn through the rotation. And for a pitcher or a batter, doesn't matter. This is where you start to kind of figure some things out after, being in the film room or in the cages or throwing bullpens. And you kind of start to see, the fruits of your labor. So I thought that was a huge start. And really from a team-wide standpoint, that was playoff baseball. That was the Astros that we've been used to watching, in big-time moments over the course of the last 6 years. They put it all together. They got contributions top to bottom, out of the bullpen with their starting pitching and went deep in a ball game. When's the last time that's happened? This season anyway. I thought it was a great, great game for the Astros, and you have to be able to build on those.
Yeah, it's one game. I mean, you know what? I'm just right now focusing on Mauricio Dubon breaking DiMaggio's hit streak. So we're going to talk more about that as the season rolls along.
He's 1/5 through it. Okay. He's got some work.
I want to circle back to the NBA for a Houston Sports Talk Classic clip. Like I said, I want to hit on this one because a few years ago, I sat down with ex-Longhorn Willow Ridge product and NBA point guard TJ Ford. Let's flash back to a bit of that conversation. Hard to believe he came into the league with LeBron James, and he's been retired. Get this now, for 11 years. Here he is.
We're old.
You came out in the draft with a pretty darn good draft. It was LeBron and Carmelo and Chris Bosh, and the names just keep going on and on. Dwayne Wade. What was it like? Because you're going through everything with those guys all through the years. I'm sure you're playing in camps with them and that sort of thing. Well, they were a little bit, a couple of years younger than you, I think, but you were going through the camps and the NBA camps and all that sort of stuff. What was it like to be around those guys and to think that I was part of this incredible draft, one of the great drafts in NBA history?
Just being a part of it, knowing it will go down in history of having probably the greatest player of this generation. LeBron James, and being next to those guys and being one of their peers, and some of those guys at that point was kind of looking up to my career at that time as well for what I did in college basketball. So, it's a huge accomplishment for myself and something to reflect on. And I was blessed, and I'm looking forward to seeing the talks 15, 20 years from now.
Any of them surprise you with what they've been able to do in the NBA?
No, I think, with the draft, everyone got to good situations that allowed them to, be a unique basketball player. I think no matter where those guys went or where we went, it was going to be successful. So the main players, they carried the weight for us. They took the NBA to the next level and the next phase. And like I said, I'm just blessed to be able to, be in the category with those guys.
Which guy do you remember as a point guard? Because we're loaded with point guards in the NBA right now. Which guys do you remember I hated to go against that guy? I don't feel like going against him. Or who did you just love playing because he was such a challenge?
Jason Kidd. I love playing Jason Kidd, being in the Eastern Conference. I got to play him in the preseason, regular season, and then we always kind of matched up in the playoffs. Chauncey Billups was another guy that was tough to play against that I look forward to. I would probably say you can go on and on and on. But for us, the East, playing those guys that many times, Allen Iverson, every night was tough. But especially those guys, I cherish them the most.
How do you look back at your NBA career now? I mean, do you feel like, I know there were some injuries and some things like that kind of held you back a little bit. Is it bittersweet, or you feel like this was just an unbelievable experience that I got to play in the NBA?
Great experience. I mean, look, I can't do anything about health and injuries. I think everyone knew coming to the NBA what my health was. For me, I left everything out on the basketball court. And I'm satisfied with the way my career went because I know I gave it my all. And when I look back at it, it's not an ounce that I can give. Even with the injuries, I think I still perform at a high level and probably I was one of the still top-tier players, even knowing that I never was 100%.
You were a Rockets guy growing up? I'm sure you had to be to the championship teams.
That will never change.
So which guys did you love watching? Kenny Smith, Sam Cassell?
Sam Cassell, he's a mentor of mine as well. Mario Elliott, Akeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler play a huge part in giving me good feedback over the years as well.
Did those guys change kind of the way you thought about things? Maybe this is something that I wanted to do. I wanted to play in the NBA.
I've been watching NBA since a kid, but I definitely, I do remember being downtown for one of the parades. So it brought joy to the city, and it made us believe that, we wanted to be a Rocket.
Great stuff there, Shaun. And we just circled perfectly back to Sam Cassell, like we were talking about him earlier in the show.
Confirmed, Sam Cassell will be the next head coach of your Houston Rockets because he mentored TJ Ford. one of the great point guards of our era. He was mentored by Sam Cassell. See, he can work with veterans and infuse them with young talent. That's very important to me. Signed, sealed, delivered, done. You heard it here first.
Yeah, he talked about Clyde even working with him a little bit, mentoring him back in the day. And, you look at those Rockets teams and, just there's leaders all over the place. And that's what you want to start seeing with this current version of the Rockets. That's what they're going to have to start doing, picking up, finding guys to maybe put with the guys that they've got. Leadership on the current roster, there's some concerns. I like Jabari Smith. There's guys that I like, but they need some more leaders in this locker room for sure.
Yeah, and you got to find the right ones. The right ones have to step up. Sometimes you get into a position where, you do have so much young talent and guys become frustrated because they want their talent to yield more W's in the win-loss column. And you don't want too many Chiefs, not enough Indians running around, in that type of a situation. And if you have a guy or guys that can pull the group together and lead them, that's the situation that you want. That's kind of the template, right? And who can those guys be? Who are they? Are they obtainable? Are they going to fit your scheme? That's the thing. And I don't know who that is right now in this market of free agency. I don't know who fits this Rockets team the best, but I do have to trust that whatever coach the Rockets can hire, if it's Atkinson, Nurse, Brooks, Cassell, Udoka, whoever. It's such a great list to have at your disposal, given the situation you've come from over the course of the last 3 years. And if they're able to make the right hire from a coaching standpoint and fill out a really, really great staff, that I trust them because they've all got a really good wealth of experience of being around some talented, and like I said, a multitude of personalities over the course of the years with a number of teams. So I'm excited, man. I really, really am excited. I feel like we're getting a Rocket basketball team back, even though we don't have a head coach yet. Just the fact that you have a great list to choose from, I'm all in. I'm here for it. I can't wait to see who it is.
1 week away from the NFL draft, Shaun. Texans. Have you changed your mind about number 2? What's going to happen? Do you know?
We've talked about so many different hypotheticals. I've not, to be quite honest with you, sat down and married any one individual. I was working the game the other night at U of H, and somebody came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, when are you on?" And I said, "Any second now." They go, "Okay, gun to your head. Who did the Texans take at number 2? And I just said CJ Stroud. That I don't know if I want CJ Stroud. That's just kind of, I'm programmed. Like, you know what? I do believe that he's, very attractive to the Texans. What do I want to happen? I just want the Texans to be right. If you said, "Hey, pick a freaking quarterback," it doesn't have to be at number 2, but who is somebody that you want the Texans to draft? I can roll with that a little bit easier. I've become an Anthony Richardson type of guy, and I don't know where the best possible place is for you to take him. If you need to trade down from 2, trade up from 12.
I think he could be there at 12. I think he could be there at 12.
Maybe. And you know what? If he is, and let's just assume, let's play the game of, you know what? The Texans go Will Anderson or Jalen Carter or Tyree Wilson. They go edge rusher or interior D-line in some capacity, right? And they went defense. Now you need a quarterback. If Anthony Richardson is there at 12, me What I want today at this point, I would really like Anthony Richardson. I think he brings excitement, but most importantly, aside from all that crap, with the fanfare, I think the guy's an absolute stud of an athlete. And the Texans, if those coaches are really worth their salt and the credit that we're giving them in terms of an offensive staff, they should be able to work with that guy. They should be able to work with most of these guys, to be quite honest with you. But Anthony Richardson, he feels more to me like an open book in terms of somebody that is just going to absorb coaching and is coachable. That's not named Bryce Young. So I'd go Anthony Richardson.
There he is, man. He's the stud of an athlete himself. Shaun Bijani, man, always good to talk to you. Let's do it again in a few days. We got Monday, one show left before we're talking draft next Thursday. Just one show left. That's it.
Let's do it. And then we get the post-mortem, right? We get to break it all down. We'll see what happens there. I'm excited for it.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.